The hum of excitement inside the Jimmy Kimmel Live studio felt different that night, louder, sharper, like everyone sensed something was coming even if they didn't know what. The audience chatted in clusters, laughter bouncing around the room, camera operators made last-minute adjustments, and Jimmy himself paced behind the curtain, reviewing cue cards he had already memorized. But the nerves weren't about the show. They were about the guest. Robert De Niro, a Hollywood legend, a titan, a man whose legacy stretched across generations, Taxi Driver, Raging Bull, The Godfather Part 2, and countless others. Fans adored him, directors worshipped him, young actors studied him like scripture. Whenever someone like that walked on stage, the energy changed. Jimmy shook out his hands and exhaled. He genuinely admired De Niro, but he also knew the truth. Interviewing him could be like trying to light a match during an earthquake. Brilliant, iconic, but occasionally unpredictable. Still, Jimmy was used to difficult guests, and De Niro usually kept things professional, blunt, yes, but measured. The stage manager lifted his headset. 30 seconds. Jimmy nodded and stepped into the wing, the lights bathing half his face in a warm glow. He glanced toward the set where De Niro waited quietly, sitting in the guest chair just off camera. The actor looked calm, eerily so. His posture was rigid but controlled, his eyes sharp as they scanned the studio. He didn't smile, didn't fidget, didn't acknowledge anyone unless directly approached. Just sat there, hands folded, as if preparing for a cross-examination. 10 seconds, the stage manager called. The band struck its opening chord. The applause sign flashed. The audience erupted. Jimmy strode out, waving, breathing in the familiar rhythm of cheers and clapping. Thank you very much," he shouted with his practiced grin. "We've got a huge show tonight, and I mean huge. The one, the only, Robert De Niro is here." Applause surged louder, echoing through the rafters. Backstage, De Niro didn't react, but something in his eyes flickered, annoyance, maybe impatience, maybe something darker. Jimmy finished his monologue, dropping jokes, easing the room into its natural rhythm. Everything was smooth, normal. Then the moment arrived. "And now," Jimmy said, lifting his arm, "please welcome a true legend, Robert De Niro." The band launched into a jazzy riff as De Niro stepped onto the stage. The crowd gave him a standing ovation, genuine, loud, overflowing with admiration. De Niro walked with that familiar mix of gravitas and cool detachment, nodding slightly as he approached Jimmy. They shook hands. Jimmy pulled him into a brief, friendly hug. "Good to see you, Bob," Jimmy said. "Yeah," De Niro replied, his voice low and not quite warm. They sat. The interview began smoothly enough. Jimmy asked about De Niro's new film, a gritty thriller about corruption and morality. De Niro perked up slightly, talking about the grueling shooting schedule, the emotional layers of the story, the young actors he mentored during filming. He didn't smile, but De Niro rarely smiled on talk shows. Still, he was engaged, his tone steady, his answers thoughtful. The audience listened raptly. His voice carried the weight of decades in the industry. Even when he spoke softly, people leaned forward, hanging on every word. Jimmy, sensing the room's high interest, dove deeper. "The early reviews have been incredible," he said. "Some people are calling this one of your best performances in years." De Niro shrugged. "We did the work. That's what matters." Jimmy chuckled. Classic De Niro answer. De Niro's eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly, but he said nothing. They moved on. Jimmy asked about De Niro's past roles, his iconic scenes, even a light-hearted question about his impressions of younger comedians. De Niro answered, but each reply grew a little shorter, a little tighter. Jimmy noticed the tension rising like heat from asphalt. Still, he pressed forward. "So Bob," Jimmy said, flipping a cue card even though he didn't need it, "you've been, let's say, vocal lately. In interviews, online, even at award shows. Some people are saying Robert De Niro has become Hollywood's official king of calling people out." The audience chuckled softly. De Niro did not. His expression didn't change at first, but the silence did. Something sharper settled behind his eyes. Jimmy kept going, trying to be playful. "I mean, you've gotten into some heated exchanges recently. Some folks think maybe you're picking a few too many fights these days." The audience murmured. Jimmy gave an innocent smile. De Niro slowly leaned forward. "Picking fights." Jimmy sat still, suddenly aware of the thin ice beneath him. "Just asking. Picking fights," De Niro repeated, louder now. "I'm speaking the truth. People don't like it." "Too bad." Jimmy nodded quickly. Absolutely, totally fair. De Niro cut him off. You think I'm some old guy yelling at clouds? The crowd tittered nervously. No, not at all, Jimmy insisted, palms up. De Niro glared. Then don't talk down to me. Jimmy blinked. Bob, you heard me, De Niro snapped. Don't patronize me. The audience reacted, a ripple of gasps moving through the seats. Jimmy straightened, his smile fading just slightly. I wasn't trying to. You were, De Niro said with finality. The tension thickened instantly. A low, uneasy hum filled the studio. A cameraman shifted uncomfortably. A production assistant froze like a statue. The moment the show returned from commercial break, the studio didn't feel like the same room. The air had thickened into something humid and heavy, the kind of atmosphere that presses down on the skin. Even the applause sign, which normally triggered automatic clapping, couldn't coax more than a half-hearted rumble from the audience. Jimmy smiled into the camera anyway, though even that smile had stiff edges. Welcome back, he said, voice tight but still professional. We're here with the legendary Robert De Niro. The audience offered a polite, but noticeably uneasy, applause. De Niro stared straight ahead, his posture rigid, jaw clenched, shoulders stiff like he had been carved from stone between segments. Jimmy tried to lighten the mood. Before the break, Bob and I got into a little, lively discussion. A few nervous laughs trickled through the room. De Niro didn't crack a smile. Not even a twitch. Jimmy's eyes darted toward the producers off stage. They gave the subtle signal, keep going. Salvage this. So he did. Bob, I want to make sure we're good, Jimmy said, turning back to him. We're just talking. You know this show, nothing we do here is meant to insult anyone. De Niro finally moved, slowly, deliberately, turning his head toward Jimmy. The stare he gave wasn't angry in the explosive sense. It was the colder kind, the kind that meant resentment had been simmering beneath the surface for years, looking for an excuse to boil over. You think you can say whatever you want, De Niro said quietly, and hide behind a smile. Jimmy blinked. Bob, I was just asking a question. Bad question, De Niro snapped. Stupid question. The murmurs from the audience intensified. The tension, once an invisible fog, now felt like a rope tightening around the entire room. Jimmy exhaled slowly. Okay, let's move on. But De Niro shook his head. Don't try to control the conversation now. It's my show, Jimmy said, trying to maintain lightness but failing. That's debatable, De Niro muttered. The audience reacted with a ripple of gasps and laughter that sounded more like disbelief than amusement. Jimmy straightened. His face lost the last hint of playfulness. Bob, I'm being respectful. I expect the same from my guests. That struck a nerve. De Niro leaned forward, voice low but more intense now. Respect, he repeated. You don't respect me. You don't respect the craft. You don't respect the work I've done. You sit behind that desk and act like you're above everyone. Jimmy's eyes widened. Excuse me. De Niro jabbed a finger toward him. You think you're hot stuff because you tell jokes for a living. The audience gasped. Jimmy held up a hand. All right, Bob, don't interrupt me, De Niro snapped. Someone in the crowd booed. Just one voice, one sound, but it was enough. De Niro turned sharply toward the audience. Oh, shut up, he barked. More gasps, then a chorus of uneasy muttering. Jimmy sat still, frozen, processing the fact that Robert De Niro, Hollywood royalty, one of the most iconic actors alive, had just told his live studio audience to shut up. Bob, Jimmy said firmly, you can't talk to the audience like that. They shouldn't talk to me, De Niro shot back. They're reacting to you, Jimmy said. Then they can react somewhere else, De Niro snapped, gesturing dismissively. This is nonsense. A woman in the front row shouted, you're being rude. De Niro pointed at her. You don't know a damn thing about me. The boos started softly at first, scattered across the studio like raindrops hitting pavement. A few people thought he was joking. Others thought he was having a bad day. But then De Niro made it worse, much worse. You're all so sensitive, he barked at the audience. This is the problem. Everyone wants to laugh until someone tells the truth. The boos grew louder. Jimmy rubbed his forehead. Bob, we need to. You need to shut your mouth, De Niro snarled. That was the peak moment. That was the point of no return. The boos turned into a wave, a throaty, unified roar of disapproval. The audience wasn't uncomfortable anymore. They were angry, furious, even, the kind of crowd that suddenly and unexpectedly becomes a mob. Jimmy stood from his chair. Bob, stop. De Niro stood too, slow but volatile, like a volcano rising. "What, you gonna lecture me now? I'm ending this," Jimmy said. But De Niro wasn't backing down. "No, you don't get to end this. You started it." Jimmy stepped aside slightly, giving space. "Bob, we can talk backstage." "We're talking now," De Niro insisted. "And these people," he flung his hand toward the audience, "these people don't deserve." "Boo." The audience cut him off, drowning his voice in a tsunami of disapproval. People shook their heads, yelled insults, waved their hands dismissively. "Leave," someone shouted. "Get off the stage," screamed another. "You're embarrassing yourself," yelled a third. De Niro shouted over them. "I don't care. I don't need you. I don't need any of this." Jimmy slammed a hand on his desk. "All right, that's it, guys, get him off." Security moved quickly, not aggressively, but decisively. De Niro tried to wave them away. "Don't touch me, Bob," Jimmy said, his voice now firm enough to cut steel. "Please." "Enough." De Niro locked eyes with him, anger, betrayal, disbelief swirling into one expression. For a moment, he looked like he might keep fighting. But then the boos intensified again, pounding the room in a relentless rhythm. He finally broke, not emotionally, but in stamina. He turned toward the wings. Security flanked him but didn't grab him. He stormed off the stage, shoulders tight, mouth set in a furious snarl. The audience kept booing until he disappeared behind the curtain. Jimmy let out a breath he didn't know he was holding and faced the camera.